The views expressed are not necessarily those of Daniel Natal and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Daniel Natal. The baldness on display is not necessarily that of Daniel Natal and is no way, shape, or form to be taken as an endorsement by the management. I don't know what it was, but 2012 appears to be the year that the oligarchs waged war on the general population. We've already talked about how in 2011 the Occupy Wall Street movement arose as a result of the financial crash, with the 99% becoming aware of the 1%. Once that happened, the wealthy seemed to go into panic mode. To shift it from a class war, they decided to foment a race war so that the working class attacked each other. So 2012 was a year a switch was flipped, and the media started promoting phrases like white privilege and white supremacy, an unconscious bias, and so forth. 2012 was also the year when the oligarchs flooded the working class with fentanyl. Overdoses and suicides among the working class went into overdrive. According to Dr. Ann Case of Princeton, America is the only country in the world with a rising suicide rate. She wrote, "The fundamental cause of that epidemic, our analysis suggests, was not economic fluctuations, but rather the long-term loss of a way of life among white working class Americans." Around the same time, TV commercials were deployed, caroling the death of the white working class with streams of commercials subliminally announcing that the future of America will not be what it used to be since its founding, starting with the Cheerios commercial written and filmed in 2012. This psychological propaganda technique was used during World War I, by the way, dropping leaflets to demoralize the enemy by telling them that their women were going to someone else. It's the most vile, cynical sort of propaganda designed to tell the traditional population to die. There are psychological effects to being constantly told to die, of course. The explosion of transgenderism is a proven point since 2012.
Gender dysphoria, formerly known as gender identity disorder, is characterized by a severe and persistent discomfort in one's biological sex. It typically begins in early childhood, ages 2 to 4, though it may grow more severe in adolescence. But in most cases, nearly 70%, childhood gender dysphoria resolves. Historically, it afflicted a tiny sliver of the population, roughly 0.01%, and almost exclusively boys. Before 2012, in fact, there was no scientific literature on girls ages 11 to 21 ever having developed gender dysphoria at all. Before 2012, in fact,
social scientist Jonathan Haidt wrote an article entitled "The Teen Mental Illness Epidemic Began Around 2012. In it he wrote, "But if you take that as your null hypothesis, then you should be open to evidence that the null hypothesis is false, and this time is different. Anecdotes about kids who began cutting themselves the week after going on Instagram won't do. You'll want to see peer-reviewed studies and high-quality surveys showing 1. That there is in fact an epidemic of mental illness, and 2. That phones and social media are substantial contributing causes." This was part and parcel of his congressional testimony where he said, "I believe I can be most helpful to this committee by first summarizing the academic literature on the changes that have occurred in teen mental health since 2012, and then spending a bit more time explaining the research linking deteriorating teen mental health to the arrival of widespread adoption of social media, which transformed childhood activity, attention, social relationships, and consciousness in the years between 2009 and 2012. Social media is being used to upload mental malware into impressionable kids. It's why Bill Gates limited his kids' computer use to 1 hour and didn't allow them to go onto social media. The former president of Facebook said the same thing. None of the oligarchs allow their kids to use it. In fact, they send their kids to Waldorf schools where all electronics are disallowed. In summation, who knows where this is leading, but very clearly, there was a war launched against the host population. And the most beautiful thing about it, they haven't even noticed. If you've gotten this far, you might be partial to our content. If you haven't already, head over to thenewamerican.com and subscribe to our print magazine published twice a month in print and daily online. It's the essential news source for freedom-loving Americans.